Looking for a little peace and quiet? Didn't think so.
Mr.
Bond. James Bond. That's a neat trick.
The original action-adventure hero, James Bond. Own him this fall.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Joe again from Grindhouse Grotto. Welcome back to my channel. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about my James Bond VHS collection. So I went over to my dad's house tonight. I spent some time with my parents. It's my dad's birthday. And it was kind of a tradition for us to watch these James Bond films on like the holidays and stuff. Like every once in a while, you know, me and my dad would pop in a James Bond film. And I remember I actually bought him like the DVD box set when I was a teenager. And he really enjoyed that. So I had the urge to go back to my house tonight after spending some time with my dad on his birthday and kind of revisit these films. Haven't seen them in a while. I own these on several formats. I own them on VHS tape. I own them on DVD. And I own the entire series on Blu-ray. So in the past, 6-7 months, I've been collecting all the James Bond films on VHS tape, and I've got multiple versions of the different films on VHS. So I wanted to share with you all the movies that I have, all the James Bond films on VHS, and the different versions I have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So obviously, the first James Bond films in the series is Dr. No. And I own this version of it, the MGM version. And it's really cool. I'm not going to go in depth about the plot of these movies because, I mean, that could be a several hour long video. I am just going to be showcasing each release. Really cool stuff. So that's Dr. No. Now, I am missing from Russia with Love. It's probably one of the most popular movies in the entire James Bond series. And for some reason, it's just been eluding me, so I do not own From Russia with Love, the second movie. Next up, I've got Goldfinger. And this was part of the James Bond 007 collection. So when they started releasing these in box sets, this was part of it. Really cool stuff there. There's Sean Connery, the original James Bond. Awesome cover art there. I love that. Next up, we've got Thunderball, a personal classic. I love this movie. I love the underwater scenes. I think this was the peak of Sean Connery. I think, me personally, I think Thunderball is probably my favorite out of the Sean Connery movies. And I apologize for the glare. I've got them in these like hard plastic protective cases. Now I own two versions of this, which I love the cover art on that. Really cool stuff. Now what they did too, when they were releasing these box sets, they released a separate box set. So if you just wanted to have the Sean Connery films, you could just purchase the Sean Connery box set. If you wanted to have the Roger Moore films, you could have just the Roger Moore films. So that is pretty cool. And they've done that with the different formats as well. Like DVD, they've done the same thing with DVD. And then when Blu-ray came out, they released, the different actors, their sets on Blu-ray. But I just prefer to own all the films. So I've just purchased all of them. I love all the actors. I think they bring a different feel to every movie they're in. Every James Bond actor has a different feel to them, a different style that I really dig. But yeah, really cool cover art on that. Like I said, Thunderball is one of my favorites. Really cool stuff there. Next up, You Only Live Twice. it's pretty cool to see how Sean Connery ages through these films. Out of all of the James Bond actors, for some reason, Sean Connery, I feel like he aged the most out of all these films. Like, if you watch Dr. No and you watch his last film, it's like, holy heck, like, he's aged so much in that span of time. But you look at Roger Moore, and, you know, he had the longest run as James Bond, but he didn't age as much, you know, from each movie. But Sean Connery, for some reason, his genetics or something, he just did not age well. There it is right there. You only live twice. Really cool. So this is the first movie that we got, what's his name? God, it's Blofeld. It's so long since I've seen this movie. So there's several movies that have Blofeld in them, and this was the first one that we got Blofeld. Next up, a lot of people don't enjoy this movie, but I really dig the hell out of it. And this is the first movie where we got a different actor. We got George Lazenby. He was the next Bond. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I think a lot of people, you know, back in the day when this movie came out, they were very disappointed because we got so used to seeing Sean Connery, and everybody was like, there can be no other James Bond except for Sean Connery. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite movies in the entire series. George Lazenby only did one movie as James Bond, but I have to say I enjoy this movie so much. It's got a really different feel to it. Now, this has also got Blofeld in there as well. So there he is. And there's been different actors that have portrayed Blofeld in all these different movies. And then there's Teresa Bond right there. Right there. Yeah, James and Teresa. So this is the first time, really, from what I know about the James Bond, you know, the lore of James Bond, and you know, these movies are all based off of books. This was the only time that James Bond was married, from my understanding. And he gets married in this movie. So this movie's got the distinction of James Bond being married, and, you know, his first official love interest. You know, because every movie James Bond basically, you know, hooks up with all these random girls, but this is the first time that we see James Bond actually fall in love and get married to somebody, which is pretty cool. Next up, now we have the return of Sean Connery. So they brought Sean Connery back for one more film after George Lazenby played James Bond, and they brought him back for Diamonds Are Forever. It's kind of a funny name, Diamonds Are Forever, basically implying that, you know, you can only have one James Bond, and that's Sean Connery. So they basically, you know, spit on George Lazenby after his movie, which I don't agree with, because I really dig the hell out of George Lazenby in the previous film. But yeah, you can really tell that, you know, Sean Connery is starting to age really, really bad in his last film. I mean, you could definitely tell if I pulled out the first one and put it side by side, you can really tell. You know, he's got a lot of gray hair in this movie too. And it really wasn't that long. If you think about, you know, the most recent actors that have played James Bond, they've done movies in the same span of time, but for some reason, Sean Connery just aged really bad. Really cool cover art there on this one. And this one's got Blofeld in it as well. And this one has Donald Pleasence as Blofeld. So this is one of Donald Pleasence's earlier movies, and I think this is the best Blofeld, in my opinion, of all the Blofelds. You know, he's got that Dr. Evil, really, he nails it down really well. But yeah, not a bad movie. A lot of people, you know, talk down on this movie. They just felt like it was really, it's not one of the best Sean Connery James Bond films. A lot of people don't look at it as a very good film, but it's okay. Alright, now we move into the Roger Moore era with the first Roger Moore film, which is Live and Let Die. Roger Moore is such a good actor. Like, he brought this whole charismatic, comedic side to the James Bond series. You know, at that point in time, in the 70s, you know, we were going through the, you know, hippie era, and everybody was just wanting to have a good time and party and stuff. And, you know, at that point in time, people were kind of burned out with James Bond. So he had to bring a different element to the James Bond series, and he had to kind of bring that comedic element. and I think they casted Roger Moore very well. He's living that playboy lifestyle. He's a little bit older than Sean Connery, but yeah, that's why there's so much women, so many women in every one of the Roger Moore James Bond films, because he's just a playboy. He's all about having fun, hooking up with women, and you know, it's some of the films are kind of silly, but I do the hell out of them. I really love Roger Moore as James Bond. There he is there. A little interesting fact that some people that, you know, don't follow the James Bond series as intensely as I do. Roger Moore actually played a TV series version of James Bond. So they had a television series about James Bond, or based on the James Bond universe, and Roger Moore played him. So when they were trying to find a replacement for Sean Connery, it was a no-brainer. This guy's already played him, and he did it really well. So there's another version of Live and Let Die, and I actually prefer this cover art over the other one, so side-by-side comparison. Sometimes I like the MGM version better, but in this case, I love the way this looks right here. This just looks so badass. I love the hell out of that. Yep. Live and Let Die. Amazing film. Next up, The Man with the Golden Gun. Badass. This is the second Roger Moore film. And then we got the great Christopher Lee, who played in this movie. So you got two legends on screen there. Really awesome stuff. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. That's zoom in worthy right there. It's really hard with my tripod to zoom in. Guys, I'm sorry. There they are. Christopher Lee and Roger Moore side by side. And it's kind of weird how they passed away right around the same time. I mean, rest in peace to both of them. They were just giants in the film industry. Two just incredible actors. Alright. There's that. Next up. Now this one, The Spy Who Loved Me, is probably the most notable and one of the most beloved Roger Moore films. And it's the one that, you know, Austin Powers basically is. You know, the Austin Powers films are a parody of this film. You got The Spy Who Shagged Me is the Austin Powers ripoff of this. Really cool there. I love that. But this film is not my favorite of the Roger Moore films. I will get into what my favorite one is when I get to it. But we get introduced to Jaws, one of the most menacing villains in the entire series. Really cool. And he passed away recently as well. So all these, you know, film giants, these movie giants that we all grew in love as kids are now passing away, which is really sad. Next up, probably the most silly of all the James Bond films, Moonraker. Which I don't mind this film. I kind of like it as just a kind of a silly James Bond film. I mean, I don't hate it, but it's definitely really cheesy at times. And this is when Roger Moore really started to age. I mean, you can tell that the difference between Roger Moore and the other actors that have played Bond. Roger Moore had so much plastic surgery throughout these films. I mean, that's why he was able to do like 7 James Bond films, because he had so much plastic surgery. He had, you know, facelifts and stuff like that, and he just looked really weird. His eyes were looking different, because you could tell in some of these films, not in this cover art, but in some pictures of Roger Moore, you can see where he had, like, you know, lifts in his eyes, and he had a lot of cosmetic stuff done. But yeah, this takes place on a space station, I believe, called Moonraker. Alright, next up, got another version of Moonraker. I think I dig the other one better, so we'll do a side-by-side comparison. This one's this is the one we've seen so many times in all the DVD and Blu-ray releases, or this one right here. This is the more classic look right here. Alright, now, this is my favorite Roger Moore film out of all of them. And that is For Your Eyes Only. I love this frickin' movie. I love the theme in this movie. I love it comes out right in the early 80s. That time period was just so amazing. Roger Moore, in my opinion, this was his best film. I know a lot of people are going to say The Spy Who Loved Me, or maybe The Spy Who Loved Me is probably his best, or Live and Let Die. But I think, in my opinion, For Your Eyes Only is his best film. I love this movie. I wish I owned the other, MGM release of this. I'm trying to find it. She was definitely one of my favorite Bond girls. I can't remember what her name is offhand, but man, she was incredible. I love her acting in this movie. I just find her to be very beautiful. This movie takes place in Greece, and I'm Greek, so I have like a fondness for this movie because it's like takes place in my homeland. But yeah, really cool there. There's a really cool scene in this movie where like James Bond is basically tied up tied up from this boat, and he's being dragged through the water. And there's some really cool underwater scenes that I really like, and I just feel like this movie is just so incredible. Phenomenal job in this movie. Next up, Octopussy. So a little fun fact about Octopussy. This film directly competed with the Thunderball remake, Never Say Never Again. Okay, so a little backstory on this. Sean Connery came back to make a unofficial James Bond film at the same time that this movie came out, and it directed, which I don't own that version of the movie, but it was a remake of Thunderball. And the other director was able to get the rights because he was the co-producer of the original Thunderball, so he still owned the rights to that movie. And he came back and he made another movie called Never Say Never, and he brought Sean Connery back. And these two movies basically were in the theater at the same time. And everybody was saying, oh my god, like Sean Connery is going to basically like crush his movie Never Say Never is going to crush Octopussy. That wasn't the case. Roger Moore did a phenomenal job in this movie, and this movie well surpassed Never Say Never. Roger Moore, I take my hat off to him. I mean, he showed out in this movie. He was like, you know what? You may have been the first Bond, but I'm the best Bond. I wouldn't say this is to me this isn't that great of a movie, but it did really well at the time, and it was able to beat out the other movie that came out. Pretty cool stuff. Alright. Now, this is the last Roger Moore film in the series, and that is A View to a Kill. He was pushing up there in age in this film. This movie came out in 1985. So, Roger Moore made the James Bond films from 1973 to 1985 with A View to a Kill. Really cool stuff. And I own another version of it. And I prefer this version over this one, because this is the cover art that we've seen a million times with all the DVD releases and all the Blu-ray releases, and this is the original poster art, which I find to be really cool. Some cases I prefer this one over the original poster art, but for this particular release, I like this one. Better, the one on the left. Alright. Now another one of the James Bond films, which is my favorite, one of my absolute favorite James Bond films. And I don't own it. I own it on DVD and Blu-ray, but I don't own it on VHS. I'm still looking for it. And that is The Living Daylights. I don't own that one yet. That is the first Timothy Dalton James Bond film. So hopefully here soon I can get my hands on that and I'll add it to my collection. But I do own the next Timothy Dalton film, which is License to Kill, which I find to be really good as well. Timothy Dalton is such a good actor. I think he brought back the more sophisticated, the more ruthless version of James Bond. So people were pretty burned out with Roger Moore and his silly side of Bond, and they were looking for a more serious James Bond. And then when Timothy Dalton was signed on to play James Bond, he brought that seriousness, man. He brought that ruthless, like, gonna kick some butt and take some names in James Bond. Man, I did the hell out of Timothy Dalton. He's such an underrated James Bond. Nobody ever talks about him, but damn, man. I really wish he actually was signed on for the third James Bond film. But because of Albert Broccoli, the producer, the guy that started this whole thing, he passed away when they were going to release the third one, and they never were able to get it out in time because of rights issues and stuff like that. So that's the reason why we went such a long time between this film and then Goldeneye. There was the longest period of time between releases of James Bond films, and unfortunately, they were never able to get him back for a third film. But that third film, for anybody that doesn't know, was supposed to be called In the Company of a Lady, and that's named off of one of the original books, the James Bond books. And they actually had released the title of the name. There's posters out there of that movie. But yeah, In the Company of a Lady. Maybe in the future they might release that movie under that title. But that would be really disappointing, because I feel like that should be, left in history for Timothy Dalton. He deserved to have a third film. He only made 2, and I really liked his portrayal as Bond. I liked Living Daylights better than this one, but this one is a really, really good James Bond film as well. I'll say something right there. I don't know what the hell that is. But yeah, really good James Bond film. Next up, Goldeneye. Many, many hours on end playing this on the N64. I love the hell out of Goldeneye. I still own Goldeneye on N64 just to throw that out there. I haven't played this game in so long, and it looks really bad on a high definition TV. But hopefully they're going to release the N64 Mini, and they will have this on the N64 Mini, and I would love to play some GoldenEye 64. That'd be phenomenal. But this was one of the first James Bond video game adaptions that I played, and I spent countless hours with my friends playing GoldenEye 64. It was such a phenomenal game. But yeah, this is the movie, and this was the first movie where we got Pierce Brosnan, and he did a phenomenal job in this movie. He kind of brought back that Roger Moore swagger that we saw in the Roger Moore films, but he was kind of like a hybrid between Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton was super serious, and Roger Moore was super silly. So this was kind of like a marriage of the two actors, in my opinion. It was a return to the Roger Moore style, but it still had that Timothy Dalton look to it. So it was definitely, it appealed two different audiences. GoldenEye. Alright, next up. My least favorite out of the Pierce Brosnan James Bond films, Tomorrow Never Dies. I guess I can't really say it's my least favorite. It's just the one that I've seen the least. For some reason, I don't get in the mood to want to watch this film. I don't know. It just eluded me. I know there was a PlayStation 1 version of this game that came out around the same time or a little bit after GoldenEye, and it wasn't as successful as GoldenEye, because GoldenEye was just phenomenal, and they tried to replicate it with the Tomorrow Never Dies. It just wasn't as good. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Next up, we got The World Is Not Enough. Man, I love this one. I don't know what it is about this movie. I love the opening, opening sequence in this movie. I love this movie. I don't know what it is, but I think this is the one that I have the Pierce Brosnan films I've seen the most, and I have the most fond memories for this. I believe I was in high school when this movie came out. And Denise Richards, man, she was smoking hot in this movie. I ain't gonna lie. She was definitely brought in for eye candy, that's for sure. But yeah, really good action sequences in this movie. Just a phenomenal film. Alright. Last but not least, Die Another Day. This is a really sad day for James Bond when this movie came out. Honestly, this is not a good James Bond film. It was super, super cheesy. They went a little overboard with the gadgets, and it was to the point where it was just completely unbelievable. There's just no way that James Bond could do the things that he was doing in this movie. Really over the top. They lost focus of, what was appealing in the James Bond series with this movie. And then when we got the next movie, which has never been released on VHS, because this was the last film that was released on VHS, but when we got to the Daniel Craig James Bond films, they brought it back to a more serious tone. But this movie was so freaking silly and ridiculous. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think it's an entertaining film, but I just feel like it's so ridiculous at times. Like, you're like, what in the heck? There's one CGI scene where there's like a tsunami, and he's riding this like little craft, and you're like, what the heck? Okay, I guess that James Bond could do that. So basically, James Bond, he can take bullets, and he can do anything. I mean, it's just crazy in this film. But anyways, guys, that is the final James Bond film that I own in VHS. I love my VHS collection. I want to own all the different variations of all the different James Bond films on VHS, and I've got them all in these sleeves. And yeah, and believe it or not, I actually enjoy watching these on VHS. Some days I don't feel like I want to have that VHS feel and watch it on a old school TV and get that film grain. And so I'll bust them out on VHS. And sometimes I'm just wanting to watch them on Blu-ray if I'm on the mood. So that's my VHS collection. Now, what I also want to talk about in this video is I have many, many duplicates of all these movies, okay? So what I've done is, every time I find a James Bond movie out in the wild, if I'm out shopping at my Goodwill or at a thrift store or something, and I see copies of these movies, I go and pick them up. I just can't stop buying these James Bond films. For some reason, I just keep buying them. And sometimes I forget the ones I've already purchased, so I'll buy it and then be like, shoot, I got duplicates of it. So I've been putting together multiple collections of these James Bond films on VHS. And what I plan to do is I'm going to be doing a giveaway here soon. So I'm going to probably, in the future, sometime towards the end of the year, I'm going to be doing a James Bond themed live stream. We're going to be talking about all the James Bond films, and I'm going to be giving away a collection of the James Bond films. So if you are a diehard James Bond fan, stay tuned for that live stream. I'll do an announcement video as it gets closer to remind everybody about that. But yeah, I'm going to be giving away as many films as I can get together to make a complete set. I don't know if I'm going to have enough to have all the films, but I'm damn near close to having the entire set again. So I've got my copies, and then I've got another couple other sets of movies of almost all of them. And as I collect them, I put them together and I put them aside. And what I do is really I compare the two copies I have, and I take the better of the two copies, and that becomes my collection piece. And the other one, it kind of just goes to the side as a whole separate collection. But anyways, guys, that is my VHS collection of James Bond. I love the James Bond films. I'm super pumped for this new movie to come out next year. I believe it'll be the last time that Daniel Craig plays James Bond. Drop me a comment in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are on the James Bond films. What are your favorite in the series? Who do you want to see play as the next James Bond? That's something that I think about on a regular basis when I watch these films. I'm always thinking about the future of James Bond and who I would think would be an amazing James Bond. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Drop me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment in the comment section, and please subscribe to my channel for future content. All support is greatly appreciated. Until next time, guys, take it easy.